Good afternoon. My name is Michael Abel, student in CS-499, and this is my presentation for the code review. I'm going to be using this as my notes. I'm going to move it off screen so I can still see it. I'm going to go over the original program, the original code, and then talk about the enhancements, and at the end talk about some checklist ideas or issues I've found through the checklist so far. So with that said, I'm going to start the program so we can see what it does current day, and then we'll go through a couple of these code files. Right now, this program takes a static text file and opens it up, and it is a list of all of the items that were sold that day for a corner grocer. And once the program opens it up here, we have a couple of options to interact with the items. You can see the item and quantity sold, being able to search for it, and then listing a couple of the different things, and then of course quitting the program. I'm going to come back to this program in a little bit whenever we talk about error handling, so for now, exit out of there. This program is written in C++, and of course we have the main file that simply opens up the document. I'll show you that in a minute here, and then runs the main functions there. We reference the header file over here, and that has all of our different functions here, and then setting the variable to 0 for the cases for the program to be ready to accept the input from the program once it's in. As of right now, I'll probably get into this in the enhancements, but use the if and defs and the define, but a more modern standard is to just use the pragma and get rid of these and that. Like I said, I'll get into that a little bit later. For the actual program, we have all of our imports for input, output, strings, vectors, all the different pieces that we have here, the standard call there. And this is the main menu that comes up. Using the switch, we have 4 case statements that's set to 0 upon start, and then each one of these will call something a little bit later or lower. There's the text form, as you can see. Has not escaped my notice looking at this with more mature eyes, potentially, and I over-commented quite a bit, but at least there's no question about what I was trying to do there. I will clean that up. I actually prefer right above to comment what's going on instead of over to the side. It gets very cluttered that way. So each of the options is going to open up, try to open up the text file that is already just part of the files here, and make it searchable for right here. We're going to use a loop to look for the word. May keep this option in, but it's of course not going to be a text file. One of the first enhancements is going to be the change from a static text file to an active database. And we'll get into that, of course, on the third section where we talk about the database specifically. These are just the options as they appear now. Of course, we're not going to be doing anything with the text file anymore, so that's going to be gone, and we're going to be retrieving from the database. So each of these are going to have to be augmented or completely redone. I do intend on keeping the same user interface, being this kind of box. Instead of just having these 4 options though, there's immediately going to be some analytics. It'll give some stats for the day. I'll pick 3 statistics that I find the most useful, profit or the most sold item or something that displays automatically. In theory, that would have been a requirement from the user to say that that's what they wanted to see right away. So we'll emulate that they had a desire to see 3 things. I can still make it searchable from the database, and I'll have some pre-configured options also, so that they can quickly access that. It's not going to be open enough for them to run query statements, but they will at least have some information given directly to them. This whole piece down here for opening up the file and ensuring that it's open, we're not going to need at all. It's going to be replaced with database management, right? We talked about, this main, it's just including the header. It's got the two things that run and breaks on the 0 whenever we're all done. So those are the files. All right, I've kind of alluded to and talked about some of the enhancements, but we'll go 1, 2, and 3 based on the milestone. So for the design and engineering, we're going to change this from a static text file to a database, which means that the information is going to be dynamic. There's going to be a change in the options where the user is going to be asked to input the item and the quantity sold. That's going to be a big difference there. I'm going to make sure to add some input validations there so that they can only add an appropriate item. They can't misspell or do something else. We want to make sure we control that. And that the quantity, of course, is also a reasonable quantity. We'll may even set a limit to the quantity so they don't accidentally type in an inordinate amount of quantity there. All of that's going to go to the database, and then at the end of the day, or during the day, it's live data. They can pull up and they can see what's been sold so far, do some searching, however they're going to do that. The other kind of emulated requirement or functional requirement or consideration would be that this is a low-tech kind of a user for a small little grocery store. So we're not looking for a web-based GUI or anything like that. They're okay using the numbers from the good old days of terminal and command line. So nice, easy interface will be acceptable for them. All right. For database or for data structure, we're going to set up a table that's going to have the item, the quantity, the cost, and the profit. So the profit is going to be the cost times the quantity, and the extra little piece we have for that is that we're going to retrieve the cost of each of those items based on an identified government website that has the average cost for items. And as the user is inputting the data into the database as it enters, I'm going to look at setting up a trigger so that it will call out, grab that cost, and that'll be what goes in there. There's a couple of considerations for that. That if there's different costs on the same day, that would probably try to make a duplicate record of the same item because it's a different cost. So I'm going to have to do a little bit of logic building on that to make sure that I'm not getting extra rows and that the data comes out and makes sense. There's not 3 different carat records with 3 different values and the grocer just wants to know the total. So that'll be one of my considerations for the data structure. For the database, I'm going to use a MySQL database. That way I'm able to store the data locally with him, her, and be able to set those queries up so I can have those analytics and have everything come out from the database to that little program UI and go there. So we're talking about a major overhaul from a program that just reads a text to something that's actually alive, accepts input, and dynamically changes throughout the day. Even just saying that, there'd have to be some consideration for records whenever displaying. I'll need some kind of a timestamp, probably another column for my data, so that The query is only grabbing the current day, so I'll add that to my notes. And as for the checklist, for right now, going through the checklist and the resources, this is very simple code and is not going to fully resemble the robust program that we're going to morph this into. With that said, going through the checklist, there's a few things that stand out. As I talked about before, the commenting. This is much too verbose. There's too many things. Earlier in my programming life cycle, this made a little more sense, so I knew what was going on. The goal of commenting in a code, in my opinion, is so that an entirely other programmer who knows nothing about me can come in, identify the sections of code that maybe need to be updated or altered, and know exactly what to do and where to do it, whether they're doing a Control F to find the section or whatever it is, that the code will be nice and clear so someone who I've never met in my life can come in and interact with the code in a positive way. So that's the checklist. Error handling. There was some effort putting into making sure that the document opened and that it closed, which is good. Of course, I won't need that anymore. I did want to show you that I don't have very good input error handling. So if I look at some items that were sold and then I don't type an integer, trying to clear the screen like a terminal, that happens. That's no good. So gonna have to, based on the checklist, do some try catches, also do input validation that I talked about before, and error handling, which is mostly absent. And the only potential handling I do have, like I said, is for the text document that's not going to be a part. So the checklist is going to be very helpful as I build out the different features, as I add a new input screen, as I get the database set up, as I get some kind of API, some kind of fetch from the government website. As I do each of these pieces individually, going through the checklist will be good to make sure I'm doing everything properly there. And then of course at the very end, when the program is running and I'm not seeing errors in my IDE or compile errors, anything like that, then I go through the checklist again just to make sure the different functions make sense. Am I still happy with using cases for this switch? Is there something else I would like to try to do? Can I loop through and instead of repeating all this code, loop through and make it a little bit smaller? Because I'm probably going to have more than 4 options with the dynamic pieces that I'm going to want to do. There's a couple different considerations that will be helpful there. So this will be a challenge. I have worked with MySQL and a NoSQL before, a Mongo, but a lot of documentation was provided for the course. So this will be me having to really go out, read the documentation, and understand how to implement this. Much more confident with something like Python, but this C++ app was the best option for me, in my opinion, to make something that I would find meaningful. In my current job, I work with inventory, and this was inventory related, so I feel like there's some practical use cases for being able to understand these kind of programs and how they run and how they communicate with each other. Alright, with that said, it's going to be a big set of files. They'll be a lot different than this. Thank you for taking the time.